It was a bright Monday morning when the students shuffled into their classroom, the chatter and laughter filling the air as they found their seats. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting warm patterns on the desks, and everyone seemed ready for a normal day at school, except for little Jamal, a young black boy with wide eyes and an honest smile, who carried with him a quiet sense of pride and excitement, because today he wanted to share something special about his family. The teacher, Mr. Thompson, was already at the front of the class, writing on the blackboard with a piece of chalk that squeaked with every movement. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a commanding voice, someone students both feared and respected, and he began the lesson by asking the students a simple question about their parents' jobs, hoping to encourage conversation and learning. "All right, class, tell me, what do your parents do?" Mr. Thompson asked, turning his gaze toward the group, his eyes scanning for those who might speak up. Most of the students shuffled uncomfortably, mumbling quietly about ordinary jobs like teachers, shopkeepers, or office workers, unsure if their answers were exciting enough to hold the teacher's attention. When it was Jamal's turn, he straightened his back and smiled proudly, his small hands folded neatly on his desk. "My dad works at the Pentagon," he said clearly, his voice full of confidence and pride. The classroom fell silent for a brief moment, as if the words themselves had hung in the air, waiting to be judged, and then, instead of admiration or interest, Mr. Thompson let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking his head slowly. "The Pentagon? Really, Jamal?" he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm and disbelief, and some students giggled quietly, finding humor in what they thought was an exaggerated claim. Jamal's heart sank a little, but he tried not to show it. He had been looking forward to sharing this fact, proud of his father's important work, but now he felt the weight of the teacher's ridicule pressing down on him. His cheeks turned slightly red, and he stared down at his desk, wishing he could disappear. "You're just trying to impress us, aren't you?" Mr. Thompson continued, smirking, pacing slowly in front of Jamal's desk. "No one here believes that your dad works for the government, let alone somewhere as important as the Pentagon." The words hit Jamal like a cold wind, making him shrink a little in his seat, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes because he knew the truth and he refused to lie about it. Some classmates laughed openly, whispering to each other, pointing fingers discreetly at Jamal, but a few others looked on with sympathy, understanding that the teacher's words were unfair, and the classroom atmosphere shifted from lively to tense, a mix of embarrassment, curiosity, and silent judgment hanging in the air. Jamal wanted to speak, to defend himself, but the teacher's voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "Come on, Jamal, be honest. Are you making this up to sound important?" he asked, leaning slightly closer, his eyes narrowing, and the young boy swallowed hard, trying to gather his courage, feeling both small and brave at the same time. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second stretching longer as Jamal stayed quiet, his fingers nervously tapping the desk, his mind racing with thoughts of how his dad had worked so hard to reach his position, and how unfair it was to be mocked in front of the class. He remembered the long nights his father spent studying documents and preparing reports, the sacrifices he made to protect the country, and a surge of pride rose within Jamal, fighting back the embarrassment. Around the room, whispers continued, some students looking at Jamal with curiosity, others with doubt, and a few with admiration that they didn't dare show openly. The energy in the room was thick, like the air before a storm, everyone waiting to see what would happen next, whether Jamal would fold under pressure or stand his ground. Jamal finally looked up, his chin slightly lifted, his voice shaking just a little but filled with honesty. "I'm not lying, sir. My dad really works at the Pentagon," he said calmly, and there was a quiet confidence in his eyes, a silent promise that the truth could not be denied. Mr. Thompson paused, clearly surprised by the boy's courage, and for a moment, the teacher didn't speak, the class holding its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Jamal's classmates stared in mixed wonder and disbelief, sensing that this was not an ordinary classroom moment, that something important was about to unfold. And in that small, ordinary classroom, with sunlight streaming in and papers scattered on the desks, Jamal sat quietly, proud and anxious, knowing that today he had stood up for the truth, even when faced with ridicule. The tension in the air promised that the next moments would change everything, leaving the class, and especially the teacher, with a lesson they would never forget. After the teacher's sarcastic words, Jamal felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had expected some teasing from classmates, but not from someone he was supposed to respect and learn from. He sat quietly for a moment, trying to calm his racing heart, feeling a mix of embarrassment and anger. Yet a small spark of determination burned within him, because he knew the truth about his father. His fingers fiddled nervously with the edge of his notebook, and he could feel the eyes of some students on him. Some curious, some amused, some silently judging. He took a deep breath, willing himself not to cry. Even though his chest felt heavy, he remembered how his dad always told him, "Stand tall, son, even when people don't believe in you." And those words echoed in his mind, giving him strength. Across the room, a few classmates whispered to each other, "Do you really think he's telling the truth?" And some shrugged, unsure, while others looked at Jamal with admiration they didn't dare show openly. Even in the midst of the ridicule, he noticed his friend Malik giving him a small, encouraging nod, and that tiny gesture made Jamal feel a little braver. Mr. Thompson, sensing that Jamal wasn't shrinking under pressure, leaned back slightly, his arms crossed, and raised an eyebrow. "If that's true, Jamal, why don't you tell us more about what your dad does?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and skepticism. And the classroom went even quieter, everyone leaning in slightly, wanting to hear what Jamal would say next. Jamal's mind raced. He wanted to speak, to explain without sounding boastful, but he also didn't want to sound defensive. Finally, he said softly, yet with confidence, "My dad works on important national projects, sir. He helps with security for the country and makes sure people are safe." He paused, hoping the teacher could see that he wasn't lying. The room stayed silent for a moment, and Jamal could feel the tension thickening like a heavy fog. Some students started whispering among themselves, amazed at his courage. Others still snickered quietly, but the laughter had less power now, because Jamal's words carried weight. They felt real and true. Jamal remembered how proud he felt when his dad had taken him to a special event last year, where officials in sharp suits had greeted him warmly, where he had watched his father speak with confidence and authority, and all of those memories strengthened his voice as he continued. "I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's true, and I'm proud of my dad for the work he does." The teacher's expression flickered, a mixture of doubt, surprise, and something else Jamal couldn't quite place. Maybe respect, maybe guilt, he wasn't sure. And Mr. Thompson finally muttered, "Well, we'll see about that," trying to regain control of the classroom, but his voice no longer carried the same confidence. Meanwhile, some students leaned back in their chairs, glancing at Jamal with a new curiosity. They had seen him quiet and shy before, but now he seemed calm, almost fearless, standing up for the truth in the face of ridicule. Malik whispered to another friend, "I think he's telling the truth. You can see it in his eyes," and the words seemed to spread slowly through the classroom like wildfire, a quiet wave of belief in Jamal's honesty. Jamal's chest swelled slightly with pride, but he stayed focused, waiting, knowing that the moment he had been anxious about might be about to change everything. He looked at his classmates and thought about how important it was to never let someone else's disbelief make him doubt himself. Outside the window, the schoolyard was busy with students playing, but inside the classroom, time felt slower, almost like the world had paused. Jamal sat patiently, not knowing what would happen next, but trusting that the truth had a way of coming out. He straightened his back, shoulders squared, and whispered to himself, "Just wait, Dad will show them." And although it was quiet, a flicker of excitement passed through him, a sense that the tide was about to turn and that his courage and honesty would soon be rewarded. The classroom remained silent except for the ticking clock and the soft scratching of pens. The teacher's eyes darted toward the door occasionally, unaware that the boy he had ridiculed was about to have a moment that would leave everyone speechless. And in that silence, Jamal felt a surge of hope and confidence, a quiet understanding that truth and pride could never be taken away, and that soon, the classroom would witness something unforgettable. The classroom felt heavier than usual, the air thick with tension, every student aware that something unusual was happening. Jamal sat quietly, his hands folded on the desk. Try not to fidget, but inside, his heart was racing like a drumbeat. He could feel the curious and skeptical eyes of his classmates on him, each glance carrying questions, doubts, and whispers of disbelief. Mr. Thompson, still at the front, adjusted his glasses and tried to continue the lesson. But his usual confidence seemed shaken. His voice lacked the sharp authority it usually had. He asked students random questions about math problems and history facts. But his eyes kept flicking back to Jamal, almost as if he were waiting for a sign that the boy's story was false. Jamal felt the weight of the room pressing on him, but he refused to shrink under it. He remembered his father's advice. When people doubt you, let your truth speak louder than their words. And he silently promised himself that he would not let anyone diminish his pride. He could sense that this moment was bigger than a simple classroom argument. It was about respect, honesty, and the courage to stand tall. Around him, whispers began to grow louder, small conversations passing from desk to desk. "Do you think he's really telling the truth?" One student murmured, and another responded, "I don't know, but he doesn't seem like the kind of kid who would lie." The words traveled slowly like ripples in water, reaching even the shyest students who had been silent until now. Jamal's friend Malik shifted in his seat, glancing at him with wide eyes and a reassuring smile. He leaned over quietly and whispered, "You're handling this really well, Jamal. Just stay calm." And those words, though soft, gave Jamal a sense of quiet strength, a feeling that he was not alone in this. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, barely noticeable at first, but growing steadily louder. It was the kind of sound that made heads turn instinctively. The classroom seemed to hold its breath, every eye snapping toward the door, hearts beating faster, a sense of anticipation electrifying the air. Jamal's pulse quickened, a small smile tugging at his lips. He felt it. Something was about to happen that would change the entire mood of the room. He had no idea exactly when or how, but he knew it was coming. The whispers around him grew louder, speculation rising. Maybe his dad will show up? A student muttered, though most thought it was just a silly joke. Mr. Thompson straightened, frowning slightly. Sensing the shift in energy, he tried to regain control. "Focus on your work, class," he said, his voice firmer now, but the words fell flat. Students were too distracted, eyes fixed on the hallway, their curiosity stronger than any classroom rule. Jamal sat perfectly still, almost serene now, though inside, a storm of emotions churned. Nervousness, hope, excitement, and a flicker of pride. He remembered all the times his father had prepared for big responsibilities, long hours at the office, and important meetings he could never attend. And Jamal realized how important it was to witness the moment when the truth would finally be recognized. Then, a shadow appeared at the edge of the doorway. Tall, confident, and commanding, every student's eyes widened as the figure paused, a quiet authority emanating from him. The sound of his footsteps became louder, more deliberate, each tap echoing in the room like a heartbeat. Mr. Thompson turned fully toward the door, his face a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Jamal's chest swelled with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. He leaned slightly forward in his chair, unable to contain a quiet anticipation. The classroom seemed frozen, the air charged with expectation. Some students leaned on their desks, trying to catch a better glimpse. Whispers had stopped, and even the ticking clock seemed to slow down. The figure stepped into the light, and the room collectively gasped. The presence of the man, Jamal's father, was undeniable, commanding yet calm, serious yet kind. He didn't say a word at first, just looked around the room, eyes meeting Jamal's for a brief, proud moment. And in that instant, Jamal felt a wave of relief and pride. All the embarrassment, all the ridicule, had been waiting for this very moment. The teacher's jaw tightened, eyes widening slightly, as he finally realized that Jamal's story might not only be true, but undeniable. The students' whispers shifted from doubt to amazement. Some mouths hung open in surprise. Others tried to smile, unsure of how to react. And Jamal, for the first time that day, felt completely confident, knowing that his father's presence would set the record straight. The classroom, once filled with tension and ridicule, now held a suspenseful stillness, a quiet electricity, as everyone waited for the moment that would change everything. And Jamal, sitting tall at his desk, felt a quiet, powerful certainty that the truth was finally about to shine. The classroom seemed to freeze as the tall figure stepped fully through the doorway, a quiet confidence radiating from him. Every eye in the room followed his movement. Some students leaned forward, some gasped, and even the usually confident teacher, Mr. Thompson, seemed momentarily lost for words. Jamal's father, dressed in a crisp suit, carried himself with a calm authority, yet there was warmth in his eyes as he scanned the room. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the silence speak. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. Students shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should speak or remain frozen. Jamal sat straighter in his chair, his chest swelling with pride. He had waited for this moment, knowing that his father's presence would finally prove the truth. "Class, this is my son, Jamal," he said with a calm voice that carried clearly to every corner of the room. "I know some of you might have doubts about what he said earlier, but I am here to confirm, yes, I do work at the Pentagon, and my work is important for our country." His words landed like a gentle but firm wave, leaving no room for argument. The reaction was immediate, a mix of shock, awe, and curiosity rippling through the classroom. Some students whispered to each other, trying to process what they were seeing. Others stared wide-eyed at Jamal's father, their previous laughter replaced by a newfound respect. Mr. Thompson blinked, his lips parting slightly, the sarcasm and disbelief that had filled his voice earlier replaced by a stunned silence. Jamal's father stepped closer to the front of the room, his eyes meeting his son's for a brief, proud glance. Jamal felt a surge of relief, pride, and joy all at once. The embarrassment from moments ago melted away, replaced by the warmth of recognition and truth. He had told the truth, and now the world around him had no choice but to believe. Some students shifted in their seats, whispering again, "Wow, his dad really works at the Pentagon," and a few even tried to hide their astonishment behind their hands, while others leaned forward, eager to hear more, sensing that this was not just a story about a job, but about courage, honesty, and pride. Mr. Thompson finally spoke, his voice slightly shaky. "I didn't expect this," he admitted, looking directly at Jamal, a mixture of humility and surprise on his face. "I may have judged you too quickly." The words were short, but they carried weight. The teacher had realized the lesson he had just learned about assumptions, judgment, and respect. Jamal's father nodded slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's okay, sir. I understand that sometimes the truth can sound unbelievable," he said warmly, then turned slightly toward the students. "What matters is that we always respect each other, and we never underestimate anyone based on what we think we know." His words were gentle but commanding, leaving the room silent in reflection. The students, once nervous and unsure, now felt a wave of inspiration. They realized how brave Jamal had been to speak the truth despite ridicule, how powerful honesty could be, and how respect and family pride could change a situation completely. Even a teacher who had mocked him moments ago was humbled, a valuable life lesson unfolding in front of their eyes. Jamal felt his chest swell with pride. His father's presence alone had turned the day around. He straightened in his chair, smiling, and a few classmates quietly clapped, unable to contain their admiration. Malik leaned over and whispered, "I knew it. I knew he was telling the truth." And Jamal smiled back, his heart light, knowing he had stood strong. The classroom, once filled with awkward tension and ridicule, now held a new energy, a quiet respect that hung in the air. Students whispered to each other about what they had learned, about courage, honesty, and never underestimating someone. And even Mr. Thompson took a deep breath, realizing that he had just witnessed a moment that would stay with him. Jamal's father looked at him one last time before nodding and turning to leave, the message clear. Truth and pride always find a way, and in that classroom, the young boy's dignity had been restored. The ridicule had vanished, replaced with respect, admiration, and a lesson about courage that no one would forget. And as the door closed softly behind him, Jamal sat tall, a wide smile on his face, knowing that not only had he proven the truth, but he had also inspired everyone in that room. a moment that would remain unforgettable for years to come. After Jamal's father left the classroom, a quiet settled over the room. The air still felt charged. Every student seemed to be processing what had just happened. Some leaned back in their chairs, mouths slightly open. Others whispered in awe. And even Mr. Thompson, the teacher, was staring at his desk, shaking his head slightly, a mixture of embarrassment and reflection painted across his face. Jamal sat at his desk, his heart still racing. But this time from pride and relief rather than anxiety. He had faced ridicule and disbelief. Yet now the truth had been recognized, and the entire class had witnessed it. A weight lifted from his small shoulders, and he felt taller, stronger, almost invincible. Malik, sitting next to him, leaned over with a wide grin. "Dude, you were amazing," he whispered. And Jamal smiled back, feeling grateful for his friend's support. It was a small but meaningful reminder that courage was always noticed, even by those too shy to speak up. Some students, who had once snickered at Jamal, now looked at him differently, a quiet admiration replacing their earlier mockery. They whispered to each other, "I can't believe he stayed so calm. And his dad is really impressive." The room buzzed with a new energy, one of respect, inspiration, and reflection. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, finally lifting his gaze, his voice softer than usual. "Class, I owe Jamal an apology," he said slowly, carefully choosing each word. "I judged him too quickly, and I mocked something I didn't understand." There was a pause as he scanned the room, letting the words sink in. Let this be a lesson to all of us about assumptions, respect, and listening before judging. Jamal felt a mix of emotions, relief, validation, and even a little pride in the teacher's humility. It was rare to see someone admit a mistake so openly, and it made the classroom feel different, lighter somehow, like a small burden had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. The students' whispers grew into soft chatter, not about teasing Jamal, but about what they had learned. They spoke about courage, honesty, and standing up for oneself, about the power of truth, and about how family pride could inspire respect. Jamal listened quietly, smiling inwardly, knowing that the impact of this day would last far beyond the classroom walls. Even the shy students, who had stayed silent through the ridicule, felt a small spark of confidence. Seeing Jamal's bravery and his father's presence had shown them that truth mattered more than fitting in. That honesty and courage could change a situation completely. And that sometimes standing firm in what is right could teach lessons that no teacher's lecture ever could. Mr. Thompson, now fully composed, continued, "I hope everyone remembers this moment," he said, "about how one student spoke the truth, even when mocked, and how we all learned an important lesson about respect and humility." The words seemed to echo through the room, leaving a lingering impression on every student. Jamal glanced around at his classmates, noticing subtle nods of respect and quiet smiles. The whispers of disbelief were gone, replaced by admiration and reflection. Malik nudged him gently and said, "You really showed everyone how to be brave," and Jamal felt a warmth in his chest, knowing that courage was contagious, that standing up for oneself could inspire others to do the same. The classroom had transformed. What started as a place of ridicule had become a space for learning the most important lessons. Not from textbooks, but from life itself. The students realized that moments like these, moments of truth and integrity, were far more memorable and powerful than any ordinary lesson. Jamal, feeling proud, whispered softly to himself, "I knew the truth would win," and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had not only defended his father's honor, but had also taught his classmates about honesty, courage, and respect, lessons that would stay with them forever. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, students began packing up, many of them glancing at Jamal with newfound respect, some even coming over to say quietly, "Good job," or "That was brave of you." And for Jamal, those words were more meaningful than any reward or praise. The day that began with laughter and ridicule had ended with lessons in integrity, pride, and courage. And Jamal walked out of the classroom with his head held high, knowing that the truth had not only set him free, but it also inspired everyone who witnessed it, leaving a lasting mark on their hearts and minds. After the bell rang, the classroom slowly emptied, but Jamal stayed at his desk for a moment, taking in everything that had just happened. The energy in the room felt different now. Lighter, full of respect and quiet admiration. He could hear fragments of conversation outside the door, students sharing the story, telling each other about how the boy had spoken the truth and how his father had shown up. Malik caught up with him in the hallway, his eyes wide with excitement. "Everyone's talking about what happened in class, Jamal. You made a huge impression today," he said, and Jamal smiled, feeling a rush of pride, but also a quiet humility. He knew that his father's presence had been just as important as his own courage, and together they had turned a moment of ridicule into one of inspiration. The news spread quickly through the school, whispers following Jamal as he walked down the corridors. Students who had never spoken to him before now looked at him differently, some offering nods, smiles, and even quiet words of encouragement. It was as if the entire school had learned a lesson about honesty, courage, and standing tall even when others doubt you. Teachers who had heard about the incident also reacted, some expressing surprise, others sharing admiration. Even Mr. Thompson was approached by fellow staff members, quietly reflecting on the events and admitting that he had learned a valuable lesson about assumptions, respect, and the power of truth. The ripple effect of one brave student and his father's presence had reached far beyond a single classroom. Jamal walked toward the cafeteria, still feeling the warmth of the moment. He thought about how quickly things had changed, from ridicule to respect, from doubt to admiration, and he realized that courage was not about being loud or boastful, but about standing firm in the truth. No matter the circumstances, it was about having faith in yourself and your family, and about letting honesty shine even in difficult moments. He remembered the proud look in his father's eyes when he had nodded at him in the classroom. A simple gesture that spoke volumes. It wasn't just about the Pentagon or the importance of his dad's work. It was about love, pride, and the unspoken bond that gave him strength when the world seemed to doubt him. By the end of the day, Jamal noticed that other students began to approach him with curiosity, asking questions about his father's work, about the Pentagon, and about what it felt like to stay calm under pressure. And he realized that his experience had inspired more than just respect. It had sparked interest, reflection, and even courage in others. The ripple effect of honesty and pride was spreading, quietly but powerfully. Even in moments of silence, Jamal could feel the change within himself. He had grown braver, more confident, and more aware of the importance of integrity. He understood that challenges and ridicule were opportunities to prove your strength, to show who you truly were, and that sometimes standing up for the truth could teach lessons that no words from a textbook ever could. Later, when he met his father at the front gate of the school, the two shared a quiet, proud smile. Jamal's father placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You did well today, son," he said softly, and Jamal felt the weight of those words sink in. It wasn't just a compliment. It was acknowledgement of courage, honesty, and pride, the kind of moment that would stay with him forever. The father and son walked together, side by side, through the schoolyard, students glancing their way with awe and newfound respect, and Jamal realized something important. Life was full of moments like this where courage, honesty, and family pride could change not only your own story but also the way others saw the world. By the time they reached the sidewalk, Jamal felt a calm sense of accomplishment. The ridicule and doubt of earlier that morning felt like a distant memory, replaced by the powerful knowledge that truth and courage always find their way, and that even in small moments, standing strong could leave a lasting impression, not just on yourself, but on everyone around you. It was a lesson Jamal would carry for life. That pride in who you are and where you come from, honesty in your words, and courage in your actions could transform fear into respect, doubt into admiration, and ordinary moments into unforgettable lessons. Days passed after the unforgettable classroom incident, but the memory of what happened stayed alive in every corner of the school. Students still whispered about Jamal's courage, about his father's sudden appearance, and about how the teacher had been forced to rethink his assumptions. It was no longer just a story for Jamal's friends, but a lesson spreading quietly through the halls, inspiring even those who had not witnessed it firsthand. Jamal walked through the corridors with a calm confidence, no longer anxious about what others thought. He noticed that students greeted him with friendly nods, and some even approached him to ask questions about the Pentagon, about courage, or about how he had stayed so composed in front of ridicule. Each conversation made Jamal feel proud, not because of his father's position, but because his honesty and strength had sparked curiosity and respect. Even teachers were affected. Mr. Thompson, in particular, had become quieter, more thoughtful, reflecting on how quickly he had judged a young boy based on assumptions and appearances. He had realized that teaching was not just about lessons and textbooks, but about learning how to respect, listen, and understand. And Jamal's courage had become a subtle, powerful reminder for him every time he walked into a classroom. Jamal's father continued to inspire him as well. But in smaller, quieter ways, he shared stories of integrity, responsibility, and resilience, never boasting about his own accomplishments, but teaching Jamal that real strength came from honesty, courage, and humility. Jamal began to understand that the lessons he had learned in that classroom would stay with him for life, shaping the person he would become. At home, Jamal told his parents about every detail, how his classmates had reacted, what Mr. Thompson had said, and how proud he felt. His parents listened intently, proud smiles on their faces. His father gently reminded him, "Courage is not about being loud or proving anyone wrong, son. It's about standing by the truth and letting your actions speak for themselves." And Jamal realized he had lived that lesson perfectly. In the following weeks, Jamal noticed subtle changes in the way students interacted with each other. There was more understanding, more patience, and a quiet respect that seemed to flow from the story of what had happened. Students became more careful about mocking or judging their peers, knowing that sometimes truth and courage could appear in the most unexpected places. One day, Mr. Thompson asked Jamal to stay after class, and Jamal's heart beat faster, wondering if he was in trouble. But instead, the teacher spoke softly. "I wanted to tell you, Jamal, that I have been reflecting a lot since that day, and I admire your courage and honesty. You taught me a valuable lesson I will never forget." Jamal smiled, feeling proud and humbled, realizing that even those in authority could learn from the courage of a young student. Word of Jamal's story spread beyond the school, reaching friends, neighbors, and even the local community. People admired the boy who had faced ridicule with honesty, and the father who had supported him so calmly. The story became more than just a classroom moment. It became a small legend about courage, integrity, and family pride, inspiring others to act with honesty and bravery in their own lives. Jamal began to feel a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with fear of judgment. It came from knowing that standing by the truth, even when mocked or doubted, could change hearts and minds, and that courage was contagious, spreading from one person to another like ripples in a pond. He walked the school ground with a calm awareness that he had grown, not just as a student, but as a young person learning the power of integrity. Even the youngest students, who had once seen Jamal as just another boy in class, began to look up to him, asking quietly for advice, or simply smiling in recognition. And Jamal realized that his bravery had given others permission to be brave as well, teaching them that honesty and pride were worth defending, no matter the consequences. By the time the school year progressed, Jamal had become more than just a student in a classroom. He had become an example of courage, respect, and integrity, his story a reminder that even small actions, like telling the truth and standing tall, could leave a lasting mark on the world, inspiring others to act with honesty, confidence, and pride. The weeks that followed the classroom incident became a time of quiet transformation. Jamal walked through the school with a new sense of confidence, no longer worried about whispers or sideways glances. The story of his courage and his father's unexpected entrance had spread far and wide, leaving a mark not only on his classmates, but on the entire school community. Even the shyest students, who had once been too timid to speak up, now held their heads a little higher, inspired by Jamal's honesty and bravery. Teachers approached him with subtle smiles of respect, and Mr. Thompson, once so quick to judge, had become a different kind of teacher, one more aware of the impact of words, the weight of assumptions, and the importance of listening before speaking. Jamal felt a quiet pride in himself, but he also understood that the true lesson had been much bigger than personal vindication. It was about integrity, courage, and the power of standing for what is right. He remembered every moment in the classroom. The ridicule, the whispers, the tension, and finally the relief and respect that followed. And he realized that those moments had shaped him into someone stronger, more aware, and ready to face challenges with honesty and confidence. At home, his parents noticed the change as well. His father, always calm and composed, said one evening, "Son, you did more than tell the truth. You inspired others, and that is a rare kind of courage." Jamal smiled quietly, feeling the warmth of his father's pride, knowing that he had honored not just his family, but the principles his father had lived by every day. The school continued to buzz with stories of Jamal's bravery, and it became more than just a tale about a Pentagon worker's son. It became a lesson in integrity, a reminder to every student and teacher that respect, courage, and honesty are qualities that can transform a moment, a classroom, or even a community. Students who had once doubted Jamal or joined in the laughter now spoke of him with admiration, quietly acknowledging the strength it took to face ridicule without flinching. Even outside the classroom, Jamal noticed changes. Younger students approached him for guidance, asking how he had stayed so calm, how he had spoken the truth without fear, and he realized that the impact of one brave act could ripple far beyond a single day or a single room. The courage of one child and the quiet support of a parent had become a story that inspired others to act with honesty and pride in their own lives. One afternoon, during a school assembly, Mr. Thompson shared the story with the entire student body, not to embarrass himself, but to highlight a lesson in courage and respect. He spoke about assumptions, about the danger of judging others too quickly, and about the power of truth. And Jamal listened quietly from his seat, feeling proud, not because he was the center of attention, but because his experience had taught a lesson that mattered deeply. Jamal's father visited the school again a few days later, but this time it was different. There was no tension, no skepticism, just quiet pride and support. He spoke briefly to the students about honesty, dedication, and the value of integrity, and the room listened intently, realizing that courage comes in many forms, and that standing by the truth can have a powerful, lasting effect on those around you. As the school year went on, Jamal carried the lesson with him in every class. Every interaction, every challenge he faced, he had learned that courage is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, firm, and unwavering, and that the respect of others often comes not from boasting, but from living honestly and proudly. By the end of the year, Jamal's story had become more than just a memory. It had become a guiding principle, a reminder that even in moments of doubt, ridicule, or disbelief, standing tall, speaking the truth, and having faith in oneself can inspire respect, change minds, and leave a lasting legacy. And as Jamal walked out of the school on the last day, he held his head high, proud not just of himself, but of the lessons he had shared, the courage he had shown, and the inspiration he had sparked. And everyone around him, and in that quiet moment, as sunlight bathed the schoolyard, Jamal knew one thing for certain. Truth and courage are always stronger than doubt and ridicule, and the impact of standing for what is right can echo far beyond a single classroom, touching hearts, changing lives, and inspiring generations to come.